Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and this is the long-awaited part 2 of the logical analysis of the Flat Earth debate between the one and only Austin WITSIT and Lord Lodge, what is now known as Soy Lodge. I mean, you could read the soy right all over this guy's face. You can practically see it oozing through his pores. The very essence of his being seems to emit soy. So it's very difficult to get through these. It's been quite some time since part 1. We will attempt to finish, but I hope nobody will be surprised if we do not get done in part 2 here. I am a mere mortal. There is only so much soy I can handle in one sitting. So for those that want 12 hours straight, sometimes I can deliver that. Sometimes I can. But most of the time, depending on the soy level, depending on the goofery level, I may need a break and recovery time from the sheer illogicality of the arguments presented by some of these anti-flat earth grifters and soy goofs. Now, I don't know if I would call Soy Lodge an anti-flat earth grifter specifically, because his entire channel wasn't set up specifically to be anti-flat earth. So he's not in the same category as some of these other goofs like McToon, Fight the Flat Earth, just a lot of these other goofs who are going full-time in humiliating themselves in flat earth debates. Soy Lodge does not appear to be such an individual, but goofy nonetheless. Again, I am not a flat earth proponent, I am not a globe earth proponent, I am only a proponent of logic and reason, which is quickly going extinct in our world, as videos like these definitively prove. So if you want to help support the MindShock podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunks of any kind, leave them in the comments section. Or if you are with us live in the live chat, I'll try to get to all of them. So we have some of the usual suspects in the house and some newer people who I don't recognize. I'm not saying you weren't here before. Obviously, Run Boston Bear here. I am Ion's cat. Dr. Boss. Don't remember. Dr. Boss saying the soy lore gets his panties in a bind while WITSIT kindly presents facts and carefully expresses a logical train of thought. Soy boy soiled his britches. This guy a poet? Soy boy soiled his britches at the end. Definitely epic Glober display of emotional ball fetish. Interesting. Tony Coriolis in here as well. Johnny Sizzlechest. Haven't seen Johnny in a little bit, I don't believe. Rig 5. Jess Palmer. DITRH. Dave Weiss. I will get that scheduled. Dave Weiss is the next Flat Earth interview on MindShock. If you haven't checked out the Mark Sargent interview, you could check that out. There are some tech issues occasionally, not just in YouTube, but I will schedule with Dave soon. Swirly in here. David Mills. Heracles, Justin Johnson, Jeremy Bird, Mr. Air. Haven't seen Mr. Air, I don't believe. Jonas Zen, also been a while. Okay. Texas Rose. So, let's get started. If you haven't checked out part 1, check out part 1. Austin WITSIT, of course, the best debater I have ever seen. There is no close second. No, that doesn't mean I think he's right about his conclusion, doesn't mean I think he's wrong. Same thing with Soy Lodge. No matter the mental disability, he could still be accidentally correct about conclusions. For the triggered Dunning-Kruger crowd, the coincidence there is the authority-worshipping cultist, scientism, statist bootlickers up in here. I don't know how many times I have to say this. This is not about conclusions. I'm not pushing any conclusion. This is all about logical argumentation and debate. Who is committing the fallacies? Now, obviously, there is the fallacy, which clearly explains just because you committed a fallacy doesn't mean you're wrong. Well, most people think 1 plus 1 is 2, therefore it's 2. Well, it is 2, but that's not the reason why. Because if most people believed it was 3, it would still be 2, regardless of what most people believe. That would be an appeal to popularity logical fallacy. So just because you're using a fallacy to support a conclusion, the conclusion could still be true, but you're still fallacious. And that's what these analyses are all about. A lot of people get triggered by that. Alright, so let's pick up right around where we left off. I scrubbed it back just a tiny bit so we can make the point about Eratosthenes, because obviously Soy Lodge here, he's so religious in his blind faith of scientism and authority worship. He hallucinates that Eratosthenes' experiment, not only did Eratosthenes definitively exist, but the experiment was done in the manner it was done, even though supposedly the exact details were lost, but somehow it still magically proved the Earth was a globe, stacking all of these assumptions, and obviously we have no idea how they actually did it back then. Or even when they did it, if they did it. But this goof is just, he's such a zealot in his blind faith in scientism. Austin's going to educate him a little bit here. We'll see if this education is able to be processed. Because again, I don't know if Soy Lodge is acting or he has a legitimate mental disability. Obviously his eyes are very close together, as somebody in the chat pointed out.
that belief, that because it's not just Eratosthenes. Eratosthenes was the one who proved it. And we don't have the exact, you're right, we don't have an exact primary source in Eratosthenes. We have, I believe it's Archimedes and Cleomedes. Cleomedes actually produced his own copy of the experiment, and it worked. It was a more simplified version that wasn't as accurate as Eratosthenes. But I would argue that saying it was Eratosthenes that was first is the issue. So I guess where would you put it? Where, like the first mention of it?
Good question. Yeah, I'm very skeptical of history, right? And so I don't know. I think that we have a very specific way we determine historicity, and it's try to get the primary source or get to hostile witnesses, corroborative, archaeological, anthropological evidence, blah, blah, blah. I grant the story because it doesn't matter. I grant the Eratosthenes story, any replications doesn't matter. Like you said, they proved it. Google will say that it proved it. That isn't true, though, right? Like even Michelle Thaler and Neil deGrasse Tyson, Michelle Thaler works at NASA. They did a Big Think video where they accurately described this, somewhat accurately. They admit that it wouldn't prove the Earth's a globe by just putting 2 sticks and looking at the shadows. And the reason is because if the sun is closer, then you're going to get divergent rays that are going to give you different shadow angles. And what they assumed was that the sun's super far away, so you're going to have parallel rays. And so then you get the difference in angles because the Earth is curving. Right. And so they had assumed the Earth's a sphere, assumed the sun super far away with parallel rays, and then he did the math. And so more accurately, he came up with the circumference of if you assume the Earth's a globe and you assume the sun is super far away. He wasn't correct about the distance as to what they claim now, right? But he assumed it was so far away that the rays were parallel. Well, so if you assume spherical trig, you can get a circumference. He was a little off, but anyway, he didn't prove it. You can do the same thing on a flat Earth, and
well, we've shown that. There's a few things that I would want to address there. So I think the first one would be that he's definitely not the first one. It was the implication based on what we do know about this time period is that it was probably Pythagoras or one of his students that first came up with the idea the Earth was a sphere. We know this because it doesn't actually appear in Greece at all as in recorded history until Plato. Plato brings this over from southern Italy after he had studied at a Pythagorean academy. He brings it over from Italy, and then he starts teaching it in his academy. We don't have any record of, what his explanation was, but what we do have is Aristotle, who came to the conclusion that the Earth must be a sphere, because if you are in Greece, if you're in Athens, then there are stars you can see from Athens, or sorry, there are stars you can see in Egypt that you cannot see from Athens.
Oh, this is gonna be painful. Wow. Okay. Wow. Oh, who's ready for some pain? I mean, look at Austin Whitsit's face here. I mean, how can you not feel bad for Austin here? I mean, he spends so many countless hours with these mental midgets. And the amount of psychological pain here in dealing with this level of mental disability, it's just, I mean, it's just a logical fallacy stack so high, and it just keeps getting stacked higher and higher, and the more Witsit points it out, the higher he stacks. So the more logic that Witsit adds, the more illogical Soy Lodge responds. I mean, this is painful. Yeah, DTC in the chat saying dumb but pretty funny. It is hilarious and painful. I mean, it is both for sure. Chronic Pain Gaming, good name there. Gonna laugh myself into oblivion. NPE says he has Ben Affleck outside the door face. I mean, it's almost like a level of disbelief. Has Soy Lodge stumped even Austin Whitsit by delivering the most nonsensical stream of goofery Austin has ever heard? I actually want to ask him, Austin, what is the dumbest string of arguments Austin has heard, just period, any subject, from any person? I mean, because this Soy Lodge goof, I mean, what he just streamed there, okay, just presupposition, assumption, circular reasoning, logical fallacy. I mean, just everything, there's just nothing here begging the question. I mean, it's just all stacking all these fallacies. I might actually get exhausted pointing them out here. It's a good thing we don't have the counter for this one, because it would have broke a long time ago. It would have fried the entire fallacy algorithm. Rig 5 says the fallacious sandwich he just spat out is criminal. Don't be silly. He doesn't look like he spits out that much food. He probably swallows all of it. Quite chunky, quite a lot of soy. I had to censor his chest in the previous analysis. Luckily, he's wearing black hair, so it's not as obvious. It didn't bother the listeners as much. But okay. So, I mean, I don't even know where to tackle this. Because Austin is talking about the methodology of Eratosthenes' experiment. Soy Lodge counters with the collective narcissism, the scientism position, what we know about this time period. Well, who's we? I mean, there's dissenting opinions from all sides, from various different historians. There's Anatoly Fomenko questioning basically all of it. Obviously, Fomenko's intelligence absolutely dwarfs this mental midget known as Soy Lodge. Fomenko, the youngest math professor at the University of Moscow. I think he was 21 when he became a professor. Just complete genius, unlike Soy Lodge here, bottom of the barrel, scraping the bottom of the barrel of these mentally disabled mental midgets trying to argue online for clout. I mean, I don't know. Or it's a fetish, it's a humiliation fetish. We've gone over this before with some of these anti-flat earth grifters. They have some kind of fetish for humiliating themselves. Or is his Dunning-Kruger that off the charts? He actually think, in his own feeble mind, does he think he's making good points here by countering the methodology of experiment A with just this hodgepodge, gish gallop, red herring, logical diversion, logical fallacies? I mean, was that 8 logical fallacies? I mean, I usually don't have this much trouble with the fallacy stacks. Even with Craig, I was able to manage. I think his record was an 11 stack. I think Craig of Fight the Flat Earth hit an 11 stack in a single point. I think Soy Lodge here is up to 8, but it's not just the 8. It's the manner in which he's delivering them, because he's talking about Aristotle. What is Aristotle's alleged assumptions, right? Because we don't really know, A, whether Aristotle ever really existed, and if he did, what he really thought. We only have whatever references, non-primary references, and, mistranslations of texts, etc. And obviously the bedrock of scientism is based on the hallucination and blind faith that none of this could have ever been mistranslated from these previous civilizations, regardless of the years. So just the mental capacity's not there for some of these brain-dead goofs like Soy Lodge to consider that ancient texts in different languages could have been mistranslated. The mental capacity is just not there for that. But let's assume that that was true anyway. So what he thought, why he thought it on some constellations not being visible, I mean, they're not that far apart on most maps. I don't know what he's getting at, or if he's that utterly clueless, he thinks it would be expected to see the same constellations from every point on Earth if it were flat. I mean, has this guy never even been in a Home Depot or somewhere where, let's say, there's like a broken, some kind of, the light fixtures are different in one part of the Home Depot warehouse versus another. You go far enough, you're not going to see it. There's nothing to do with the shape of the floor. I mean, just the level of goofery here. Just the absolute basics. I mean, yeah, this is going to be tough. This is going to be tough. Jonas Zen in the chat saying, Soy Boy is twitching throughout the whole debate. Yeah. Justin Johnson says, soy salad. Oh, man. Plotchy podcast saying he was even reading from some kind of a script and lost so hard. That would actually explain a few things, because he's clearly not able to process anything Austin's saying, so he's just reading from his script, pretending it's valid while not even understanding anything Austin's saying. That actually makes sense. That actually makes sense of this whole thing. Just because it makes sense doesn't mean it's not painful. Heracles in the chat saying his emotional support animal co-host is as bad as he... Oh, man. Yeah, he'll be on that guy will be on the screen in a moment at some point. Yeah, wow. Okay, let's try to continue here. I mean, I think I've referenced this many times. I think I've even put it on the screen in part 1. I didn't have the stomach to rewatch part 1 to see what I referenced. But even, again, depending on whether the timeline is true or not, but hundreds and hundreds of years later, you still have Lucretius in his seminal work On the Nature of Things, talking about how the Earth is a flat snow globe in direct conflict with Aristotle and the others who thought the Earth was a globe. So there was clearly disagreement among the Greeks and Romans, even hundreds, thousands of years later, which this goof was obviously completely, utterly clueless about. So he doesn't even represent his cult of scientism well. If you're a heliocentric glober, how would you not be embarrassed to have somebody this utterly clueless representing your position? I mean, who wouldn't denounce this clueless goof from even entering? Like, he's this ignorant. He doesn't even know about Lucretius. He doesn't even know about all the dissent and conflict. His religious regurgitation is just based on a couple of key points that he saw in the idiot box or he memorized in an indoctrination facility. There's no actual mental capacity to do something called thinking. It's a foreign concept to this guy.
So that was
ships.
Yeah,
ships over the horizon.
Ships over the horizon. Another one actually comes from Herodotus. It's unclear if it's a true story or not. It's something that he claims to have heard. We're not sure about if it actually happened, but he claims it did. And the way in which he actually claims it didn't. He's like, we heard this story from Egypt. We think
Again, this is all completely irrelevant to the methodology Eratosthenes utilized for the alleged experiment. So he's so off in the weeds here with these red herring and diversion fallacies. Then he got lost with his own like he went off a diversion fallacy into another diversion fallacy. He went off in the weeds and then went off into the weeds among the weeds.
think it's BS because obviously the sun couldn't ever possibly be on your right while you're sailing west. That's impossible. And what he said was that there were a group of Phoenicians hired by an Egyptian pharaoh, Necho II, I want to say, something like that, who were hired to sail down around Africa and come back up through the Pillars of Heracles, the Straits of Gibraltar, and then to the Nile. And allegedly, when they came back, what they told everybody was that, you know, in the afternoon, like when the sun was in the sky, that as they were traveling due west, the sun was to their right. And if you're in the northern hemisphere traveling due west, the sun should be at high noon to your left.
Again, this has been gone over countless times. This clueless goof is just this utterly mentally disabled. He doesn't comprehend that without verification of where you are in relation to continents, in relation to the alleged hemispheres, all of this means nothing. This is just one gigantic circular reasoning logical fallacy. This is why I've said this so many times. Like, Austin is so done with this guy. Look at Austin's face. I don't know how Austin does it. I really do not know. I just don't know. I mean, just the level of goofery he has to deal with day in, day out. And I would like to ask him who has sunk the lowest out of anybody he's engaged with. So, again, it appears, here's the thing, if soy logic, obviously he doesn't comprehend what logic even is, so he wouldn't be able to comprehend any of the logical fallacies if he doesn't even know what general logic is. If he can't comprehend the scientific method, the capacity's just not there. Why are we expecting that of him if the capacity's not there? If it is there and he's just playing stupid, if he's just going full retard like Craig, if Craig is a good actor of Fight the Flat Earth, he might be the greatest actor of all time. He might be the only one who can actually go full retard and pull it off convincingly. With this guy, it doesn't appear that he's acting. It appears that this is just genuine mental disability, and he's just regurgitating things he memorized from his religious cult of scientism without even considering the possibility that it might be inaccurate, or the conclusions might be inaccurate. He's off in the weeds here with this diversion fallacy saying, oh, it's disputed what this guy said about this guy, which has nothing to do with Austin's point about the methodology of Eratosthenes' specific alleged experiment.
In this case, they claimed that it was to the right. Now, of course, that is Herodotus telling a story about some guys who said something. But because he's saying it probably didn't happen, it does suggest, in fact, that it did in a weird way. I explained that in a little bit more detail in our video on the topic. Yep. But so I wanted to, that's important because the way this comes down to us is that we have Pythagoras, his school of his academy seems to have produced this idea. Plato brought it to Greece. Plato gave it to Aristotle. Aristotle produced the actual... Aristotle's arguably the first quote-unquote scientist in Western history and European history because he actually sat there and went through the concepts of what science is and how things work. He was wrong about a lot of it. He thought that everything broke down to... The term atoms comes from him. He thought everything broke down to one of four elements. So it was he wasn't quite there.
No, he also believed in the ether as the fifth quintessential element, and Democritus seems to come up with Adam before that. But I guess
I wanted to run that a little bit because I wanted to see if Austin would correct him on this Physics 101 basic that Soy Lodge got wrong, completely wrong. It wasn't Aristotle, obviously. It was Democritus and possibly actually Leucippus. Democritus was his pupil. They proposed that all matter was composed of small indivisible particles, which they called atoms. So again, I mean, just a quick 2-minute, like even Wikipedia, I know people don't like Wikipedia, but you can check the sources at the bottom. This is all 101 stuff that it's taught in the same indoctrination facilities that Soy Lodge claims are legitimate. I mean, this is 101 stuff. This isn't even high school level. It's somewhere in between elementary and middle school. Even in those texts, they clearly talk about Leucippus and Democritus. I mean, maybe just one little byline. We're not talking about, thesis papers. But just the reference to atoms is here. So for him to get such a basic point wrong, I mean, obviously I'm not surprised, but that's the thing with these goofs. These clueless narcissistic goofs who want to argue who want to argue on flat earth, they don't even have the basics of their scientism religion down. Like goofs like Sartain, so-called Professor Dave, Craig, McToon. I mean, that's why it takes all these countless hours to correct them within scientism, because they don't even have the scientism correct. And this level of goofery here. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of distracting how Soy Lodge keeps fondling that microphone. I mean, this is obvious some kind of trophy generation kid who just he has so much soy, there's no focus ability. And without the ability to focus, you can't really learn anything. Like, you can regurgitate on command like a circus animal to get treats, aka degrees, if you pay enough money for them, like Soy Lodge. But obviously, the focus is just not there. You can tell that the soy goof, he can't focus. He has no focus ability. So the critical thinking will not follow, because in order to think critically, you need to focus. In order to process information instead of regurgitate, you need to be able to focus long enough to think about it. But this guy has the mental capacities not there. So what are we really expecting from this poor goof? Like, if you're engaging with a trying to talk to a mentally disabled toddler, what is the expectation level? Because that's the mental level Soy Lodge is at.
Not to cut you off, but just to point out, like, none of those things do prove it, right? Like, this kind of makes my point stronger in that sense, because yes, if those stories are true, what they thought proved the Earth's a globe didn't, right? Like, Eratosthenes doesn't prove the Earth's a globe at all. You can replicate it on a stationary flat Earth with a local sun.
You have to prove that there's a local sun first, though.
Well, that's what we actually observe, right? The claim is that what we observe is the illusion of divergent rays, and it is true that perspective can cause that, and we do see that there's some perspective effects, but
the other thing that's interesting here, because we can call Soy Lodge a lot of things. We cannot call him a brain-dead vegetable. We can't. Because clearly he does have the mental wherewithal to comprehend the burden of proof. You would have to prove the sun is local. Now, where the mental disability comes in is where his religious zealotry and blind faith in the corrupt and fallible, he hallucinates that you don't have to prove that the sun is distant. You only have to prove it's local. It's a one-way street with religious zealots. With these clueless zealots, not completely brain dead, because there is the identifier, you have to first prove A. They're just so hopelessly indoctrinated into their cult, they don't believe the same is true. Obviously, it's hypocritical. They don't believe this is true for anything written down in their religious scrolls. The scrolls of scientism, what they memorize and regurgitate at indoctrination facilities. They don't believe the variables have to be proven for anything from their religion, but anything outside of that. That's like heresy to their religion of scientism, and there they start demanding proof. They start demanding proof and evidence. They demand nothing from their religious cult, but anything outside of the religious cult, that's where they start demanding. Which they should. If they had a neutral position, then yes, you would have to, how do you prove where the sun is, how far the sun is? You would kind of need to know that information if you're performing a trig-like experiment where you would need that information.
We observe divergent rays that center onto the sun. The claim is that they're actually parallel. So you would have to prove that, right? I mean, what we see is a local light source. We see it get warmer when the sun's closer to us. We see it get dark as the sun moves away and it gets cooler. Like what we observe is that there's a local light source. And then we talk about like it was more of an ontological premise, really. So it was like they thought the sphere was like the perfect shape. And as to whoever came up with it whoever came up with it first, who cares, right? Like Aristotle's who they'll tell you, and supposedly looked out and saw a boat disappear. Well, okay, well, too bad he didn't have a camera or binocular. He would have saw the boat again, right? So his assumption that the boat disappearing proved the Earth was a globe was incorrect. And every single one of these ancient stories are wrong. Now that doesn't prove the Earth is flat. What it proves, though, is that these mainstream propaganda stories were told about how they proved the Earth was a globe back then didn't prove the Earth was a globe. It's not accurate, right? And like obviously you can't just assume the outcome at the onset. Like if I use spherical trig and assume the distant sun, I can make the Earth a globe in math and then claim you prove it. And long story short, man, we went and tested it. I mean, the Earth cannot be what they said. We falsified the radius, right? With long distance observations and microwaves and radio waves, and physical tests have shown the Earth's not curving at that rate. So I mean, that's the real crux of the issue is, I mean, would you agree? I don't know if you've ever thought of this, but like it boils down to, if you wanted to be very efficient, you would go straight to the R value, the radius value of the Earth. If the R value is wrong, right, everything else is wrong because everything uses it, right? We use it for everything, for the distance of the sun, the moon, and gravity, and everything.
When you use it to calculate curvature, when you're looking out over a distance, it works. It's right.
Okay. So, see, this is where I have trouble. So, is this a combination of being legitimately mentally disabled, but then playing even stupider than you are? So, he's a special kind of stupid. I mean, he's bottom of the barrel. But is he pretending to be even dumber than that? Like, so, he's already extremely dumb, but is he putting on an act of being dumber than he already is, which is already low? Because who is to believe he's never seen... He's never looked at any flat Earth content. He's never seen any of that where the 8 inches per square mile gets decimated. So what math is he hallucinating works? Not to mention, we don't even need to get into the infrared and all of that, but I wonder how WITSIT is going to handle it. He almost has a look of disbelief here, as if like this guy has done zero research on flat Earth while entering a debate with one of the lead proponents. I mean, again, this is like a toddler going in the ring with Mike Tyson because he was cheerled by his other brain-dead followers, or if his followers aren't brain-dead, they just wanted to see him get destroyed because they don't like him. I mean, it is kind of hard to imagine anybody genuinely liking Soy Lodge. Like, we're talking about just in general any of the content this goof produces. Because it's just drowning, it's just drenched in his narcissistic stupor. It's just, who wants to deal with that much narcissism, even if he's accidentally correct about certain things? I don't know the entire span of topics he covers on Lore Lodge, aka Soy Lodge. But he covers, I mean, Flat Earth, I don't think he's done that many videos on Flat Earth. Flat Earth is definitely a minority when it comes to the span of topics he covers. I mean, does anybody genuinely like this guy? So they basically goaded him. They know he's dumb, so he believed when they said, "Oh yeah, you'll definitely beat Austin Whitsitt in debate. Go debate Austin Whitsitt." And now they're just laughing as he's getting thrashed. I mean, think about how mean his followers must have to be to throw this mentally disabled goof into the ring with Mike Tyson and just watch the aftermath of that. I mean, it's sad on so many levels.
Every time.
It's not.
It is. As long as you account for atmospheric refraction, it's right every single time.
So this is what I'm saying. So think of what you just said. So you said it's right every single time as long as you account for atmospheric refraction.
Yeah.
Well, atmospheric refraction is basically a bar that you can move wherever it goes. So basically,
depending on discrete variables, yeah, it's in any given situation, you can take the weather conditions that day and you can calculate what the atmospheric refraction should be. And my point is that when you do that, the measurement works every time. You have to deliberately not do that. No, we proved it.
People think that.
We did it in our video. We proved it.
You went and measured certain variables, plugged it into a refraction equation, and were able to predict where you're going to see something in the distance? Because I've been asking for someone to do that for 5 years.
So we actually didn't even need to go to those lengths.
So he didn't actually have to do it. He just pretended it worked. He didn't actually have to go through the lengths of backing up anything he said. Oh man. Wow. I'm not sure. I haven't seen anyone dodge and cope quite like this. To admit that you were too lazy and too incompetent to even actually do anything to back up your hallucinations, your post hoc logical fallacy, where you just plug in whatever the difference would be to magically pretend it matches. First of all. Second of all, it doesn't do that every single time anyway. Even when you account for refractions, there's plenty of anomalous observations that don't match, even with the alleged refraction. Obviously, this goof, because he's like a 4-year-old. Either this is the best movie of all time or this is the worst movie of all time. This appeal to extremes, false dichotomy. I mean, his brain is not mentally capable of understanding pretty much anything. So he has to pretend in his emotionally triggered state, oh, it works every single time. Every single time. There's not a single dissenting example, even though there are many. Not to mention his entire false premise of refraction being a factor that magically you plug it in and all of a sudden 8 inches per square mile works every single time, as long as you change the refraction amount to match that. Now, does he not even realize how dumb he sounds? But yes, whoever mentioned that earlier about his co-host here, his co-host is looking at him like, you're a moron. Like, do you not understand how dumb you sound? I mean, look at his co-host's face. Let me zoom in here. He's like, what are you doing? He looks kind of mad at him that he said that. Look at his co-host. His co-host looks like he's capable of some kind of brain function. He's like, what? Because and look at Soy Lodge. Soy Lodge genuinely looks oblivious to how dumb he just made himself sound. Well, I guess that's his default state. But still, we didn't even have to go to those lengths. We could just pretend it matches every single time without actually doing any kind of real science or observations. Flatless says his co-host has social awareness. Soy Lodge does not. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like, how did this guy get any followers at all? Let's see how many he has. I almost typed in Soy Lodge. Lore Lodge, 547,000 subscribers. So, I mean, I guess he just bought a lot of subscribers. Does he have, like, rich parents or something? So he just bought a bunch of subscribers. Because how does somebody with, who's basically almost flatlined mentally, able to amass, I mean, I know there's a lot of, there are 547,000 dumb people out there, but the chances that they all find and subscribe to his channel, I mean, what are the chances there? The ratio of views definitely seems off too, because his videos are getting a lot of views. He's getting over 100K with 547,000 subs. That's kind of a lot. Even channels with 1 million plus subscribers, in 1 or 2 days, they might not get that many views. So is he paying for subs and views? Wouldn't be surprising, obviously. A lot of YouTubers do that. Or do they just love watching him humiliate himself on all of these topics? I don't know. I mean, let's look at some, like, legit popular channels. Yeah, so Joe Rogan has 17.3 million subs, and he's only getting a couple 100,000 views. So he's only getting about maybe twice the views, having way more having almost 20 million subscribers. Soy Lodge is at 300-something thousand, getting half the views as somebody with way more subs. So yeah, definitely some funny business going on with Soy Lodge's YouTube channel. Let's continue here.
Because what we found is that every single time you look at something, it works out within enough of a margin that you don't need to run the calculation. For example, when we looked at the islands in the not the Adriatic,
Mediterranean,
but I forget what the exact west coast of Italy is called. But you look at the islands between Corsica and Italy, and they end up showing within a matter of 100 meters in either direction. They end up showing what you should expect to see at that distance. We copied it. We looked at it with Philadelphia. We looked at it with Manhattan. We looked at it with Chicago. In every single instance.
So in 3 anecdotal logical fallacies, in every single instance of 3, when you magically plug in the difference to account to make it match the 8 inches per square mile calculation, it matches. Who would have thunk it that a post hoc logical fallacy is a fallacy for a reason? Who'd have thunk it?
It matched what the equation said it should be. So that's why I take issue with that.
Because I've done hundreds of observations, brother, and that's not what happens. I've seen things that should be 2-3 miles below the curve of the Earth. And you can say atmospheric refraction. Yeah, it's called terrestrial refraction. Standard refraction. It's 7/6R, which means your model says that on average the Earth looks like it's 15 to 20% bigger than the actual size of the globe, which is just begging the question. But I've seen it where it needs to be a 280,000 mile radius. And so that's what I mean by you can just move the bar wherever you want, right? So what is that now? That's 64/6R. And like, okay, must be true. Then there's no way to falsify it, right?
Well, again, what we're saying is it's a variable by variable basis. So
a variable by variable basis? Look at Austin's face. It's like, what is this goof smoke? So, obviously, Soy Lodge didn't comprehend what he just said. So, is Soy Lodge claiming that refraction can vary so greatly that the Earth would appear hundreds of thousands of times larger than it actually is? That's his hallucination? That's how much refraction can vary? What I haven't heard Soy Lodge mention is the difference between true horizon and apparent horizon. Or is he one of these goofs that think train tracks touch in the distance because they look like they touch? So, is Soy Lodge, is the mental capacity not there to process not just Austin's position? He doesn't appear to be able to process his own alleged position. Austin's trying to help him out. He's being nice. He's trying to help him understand his own scientism model, but the goof just doesn't. I mean, the mental disability appears to be too much to overcome to get to this basic children's level. Court of Public Opinion says, Boer Lodge, I've always found him dull. I mean, he's nowhere near as entertaining as Craig and his Dunning-Kruger stylings. Like, Craig is legitimately entertaining. The lengths Craig is willing to melt down to humiliate himself. I don't know if I've seen anybody like that. Boggin says he's about as exciting as an STD. Let's try to continue.
You need to move the bar because the conditions would differ in any given situation. But I guess when you say that you've seen things that should be miles beneath the horizon, what are you talking about?
How has Austin not checked out here? Like, Soy doesn't even understand what it means for something to be miles beneath the... He doesn't understand what horizon means, what miles mean, what something means. Like, does he not understand the point of anything? So if he's just reading from the script without actually understanding anything his own script says, that actually does explain what's going on here. Because clearly he doesn't understand anything Austin's saying, but he doesn't comprehend his own script either. He's just regurgitating on command like a circus animal. I don't want to insult circus animals. Their mental capacity might be much more than this poor guy. But I mean, I kind of feel bad for him. Does anybody else feel bad for laughing at him?
Yeah, so for example, one of the most famous observations is because a lot of the stuff that I've seen, I don't have all of it recorded. So we'll just go with like the most famous recorded ones, like Canigou Mountains. The Canigou Mountains can be seen from 273 miles away. It actually broke the world record photo. 255 miles away with the silhouette, whatever, 153. Now, it's always based on how high you are, right? That's how. So if you look at it from other mountains and say see at 273 or 255, the top of the tallest point of the mountains should be like an additional 2.5 miles. There should be 2.5 miles of curvature up above the top of the mountain. Now, what globe Earth proponents will do is say they will avoid that number because it sounds crazy, and it is crazy. And they'll say, oh, but let's look into it degrees. And if you take it to degrees in relation to this huge Earth, you can make the number smaller and sound like not as big of a deal. You're still claiming that the mountains were lifted optically over 2.5 miles and stopped right where they needed to look like the Earth was flat. And I'll tell you, you should look into this. There's an observation in Canigou, and it happens 2 times a year, right?
And this is very telling here. Immediately, Soy Lodge goes to Cope. He immediately goes to Cope and try to find something, try to make Austin wrong instead of trying to process what Austin just said and have an intellectually honest, scientifically logical conversation or debate. You can tell that's not what Soy Lodge is here for. He's here to indulge his narcissism and to maintain the faith of scientism. He's clearly not here for any kind of honest conversation or debate of any kind. Because look how triggered he immediately goes to Cope and try to find something to make Austin wrong. instead of first trying to process the information. Because it does sound kind of silly that you're always going to pretend, no matter what, you're always going to change the amount of refraction to match flat Earth observation. So no matter what, so if it has to be 2.5 miles, you just say refraction is 2.5 miles. If it's a mile off, you just say, oh, well, it's just a mile off in that instance. But no matter what, it always has to magically match flat Earth observation. Magically. That's the scientism position, and it's so silly. Soy Lodge appears to not have any kind of rebuttal here, so his cope is to go, he's either asking somebody or he's looking something up. I mean, where was this energy when he was incorrectly talking about the origin of atoms or any of all the other scientism he got wrong? Where was this energy to even verify his own position of scientism before? I mean, I guess soy prevents you from having a lot of energy in general, but you could tell he's really triggered here because Austin just mopped the floor with him in such a basic point where it really exposes how silly the post-hoc logical fallacy is. The cope of refraction is always whatever the difference in amount is between a flat Earth observation and a globe Earth observation. So you just change the amount of refraction to make it always look like the Earth is a level plane. That's kind of a silly possession. I mean, we didn't get into horizon and true horizon because that's not actually what's going on. But according to this goof, like, I'm sinking to Soy Lodge's level. So if he's listening to this, I mean, he probably still won't understand it. But I mean, I tried to dumb it down just like Austin did to see how silly what Soy Lodge is saying is. Because we can get into horizon and true horizon. I talk about that all the time. But it still doesn't change the point here.
In February and of September. And so based on where the sun sets, we know that the sun's going to set behind the mountains on those days, right? Because the sun changes throughout the year, right? With its ecliptic path. And when the sun sets, so you won't see Canigou, but then the sun sets behind it and you can see it, right? Because it backlights the mountain and now you see the silhouette of it. And you can see these mountains predictably on these very exact days that the sun's going to set behind it. And it's should be miles below Earth curvature.
So that's a very interesting point there. So would that indicate that it's clearly not refraction because it's only when the sun is in the position to backlight the mountains and it never occurs when the sun is not in that position? So this magic refraction only occurs when, if it wouldn't have been refraction, it would look like that? Is that Soy Lodge's position? I'm just wondering here. I'm just asking. Alien Big Cat 23 getting triggered in the chat here. You call the whole lot of scientism real paranoia. That you're talking to me? Are you pretending understanding what the scientific method is paranoia? So being on a preschool level understanding. Okay, let's bring up the preschool sheets for Alien Big Cat 23. We're bringing up the preschool worksheets. So these are the most dumbed down I was able to find for goofs like Big Cat 23. So this is as dumbed down as it gets. So I don't know if Alien Big Cat 23 has been around for a while, so he's probably just trolling. But if the goof doesn't know what the scientific method is, anything that science is a methodology that matches the scientific method. So let's bring it up here. This is earlylearningideas.com, Alien Big Cat. Earlylearningideas.com, scientific method for kids. The scientific method for preschool kids. It's easier than you think. So, here's the worksheet here, or the chart here, rather. I'm going to bring it up in a second. I mean, hey, we got some slow people in the chat like Alien Big Cat. Let's try to accommodate them. I mean, he's probably trolling, but let's try to accommodate. So this is the preschool level. Okay? So here are the steps of the scientific method. and the variables. Notice Craig never talks about the variables, fight the flat earth. So you need purpose, research, hypothesis, experiment, analysis, conclusion. The variables here are dependent, independent, control. Okay, so if you have those and you account for them, you're engaging in science. If you're just pretending refraction always matches, that's not science, so it's scientism. I mean, is that too difficult, Alien Big Cat? I can't dumb it down further than that. I'm sorry, man. I mean, does anybody in the chat know how to dumb that down even further? I'm not sure it can be. I mean, is it possible to dumb it down further than this? I mean, I don't know. Is it like, I don't know how to dumb it down further. It's quite clear here. I mean, the false cause logical fallacy, that's why it's false cause. It's when you're attributing a cause to something, for example, saying it's a refraction when it's not refraction. If you want to claim that it is refraction, you have to prove it according to the scientific method, not by faith. That would be scientism. So that's the clear difference. I'm obviously pro-science and advocate for the scientific method and logic and reason. That's the whole point of the podcast. Like, why you've been here for a while. Do you not understand that that's been the whole point? Whether it's true crime, paranormal, conspiracy, that's been the whole point this entire time. I mean, obviously Soy Lodge needed this demonstration as well, but I mean, I don't know how to dumb it down further. Is it possible? Is it possible to dumb it down further? Now you got me thinking. Is it possible to dumb this down and make it even simpler? I mean, here's another chart. It looks like it's relatively preschool level. An observation leads to a question. Research, hypothesis, experiment, data, conclusion. Now, in order for an experiment to be valid, do you know this one, Big Cat? What is the difference between a valid and an invalid experiment? Can you answer that? Because if you can't even answer that, I mean, none of this is going to make sense. So this is preschool level, but there's plenty of kindergarten material as well. So even kindergartners can learn about the scientific method. Look at all these different materials here for learning the scientific method. So study up. Unless you're just trolling, or you got some kind of fetish for humiliating yourself, like maybe Soy Lodge has, or he doesn't. I don't know. If Soy Lodge is this mentally disabled, he actually thinks he's making points. I mean, who knows?
So
and what you have to claim is that it's refraction that we can coincidentally predict, and it's a silhouette, which is the absence of light, right? It's an absence of light.
We said this was how many miles?
So one of the videos is 153 miles from, I think, 1,000 feet up, and then one of them is 255 miles. I just don't remember the observer height for that one off the top of my head. There's also one that's 273.
And how tall is the mountain?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
What was the name of the mountain again?
Canigou, Canigou, I believe.
Okay, Canigou.
So yeah, I mean, and that's pretty crazy to wrap your mind around, right?
Yeah, so it has an elevation of 9,136 feet, which means that if I can really quickly do math, because I can't do math, but give me one moment here. 9,136. 9,136.
I'll just let you know. I'm not lying to you guys, right? Like, I'm letting you know, like the globe model, because I talk to like people that are really invested in defending. They'll just tell you it's refraction, right? They're just going to say it's this much refraction.
So whatever it's about 430 feet of refraction from the top of the mountain.
Look, this guy's legit mental disability. He just calculated the difference off of what you see versus not see, and he just pretended that was refraction. See, this is an example of scientism, Alien Big Cat. Because calling something to match something, that's called a post hoc logical fallacy, and a false cause logical fallacy, stacked on what is a false premise logical fallacy. That's a triple stacker. And also, actually, it's also a false dichotomy, because there could be another variable that's causing that that's not refraction. So that's quad stack. That's a quad stack. So Alien Big Cat 23 was not able to answer the difference between a valid and invalid experiment. What makes a scientific experiment scientifically valid? Alien Big Cat was not able to answer and is saying you got nothing. Not arguing those points. So you don't want to argue the points of the scientific method? You don't want to argue the points and the difference between science and scientism while pretending you know what the difference is. But yeah, this was a quad stack, and look at Soy Lodge's face here. It's almost like he's proud of himself for doing the math. So he just took the difference between what should be observable and not, and pretended the difference was refraction. Like, it couldn't be anything else. It can only be refraction, and refraction has to be the exact amount to make it look like you're viewing it on a flat earth. This is the very essence of scientism. You want scientism, Alien Big Cat 23? You got it right here. Pretending something is refraction without demonstrating how, while ignoring all other potential variables, that is the religious cult of scientism.
To
Actually, I was incorrect. That's a quint stack, because that's also a circular reasoning logical fallacy. So that was a quintuple stacker, because he also pretended it could only have been, the Earth is already spherical, therefore it has to be refraction, which is still a false dichotomy, because it could be a globe and other variables other than refraction causing that difference. So it was actually a quint stack. So, yeah, let's just make that clear here. Nowhere near close to Craig's 11. Not even close to Craig's 11, but still, a quint stack is good. And this guy had an 8 stack before, right? He had an octuple stack. He had an octo stack. So he actually might have the second place. Soy Lodge might have the record for second place, if I'm not mistaken. Well, no, technically Craig, I think Craig had some 9 stacks too. I think Craig had some 9 stacks. So Craig might have first, second, third, but whatever. The person, the second place as a person might be Soy Lodge. Soy Lodge had that octo stack earlier.
where it should be visible. It's not 2 miles.
Wait, for which one?
For the closer number you gave us, the 153 miles at 1,000 feet, you should you should be able to see anything that is over 8,700 feet tall.
Okay.
And Mount Canada is over 8,700 feet tall.
2.5 miles number is certainly going to come with like the 255 value, right?
Okay.
2.5 miles above the top of the mountain specifically. That is, yeah.
What elevation was that?
I don't remember them. I don't remember the elevation. I have all this information, right, with the, it was, I didn't even know Flat Earther that did it. I talked to him though, but it doesn't matter exactly what the values are, right? My point is very simple. Even the globe Earth proponents agree that, for example, even the one that's closer, okay, the mountain shouldn't be observed.
No, the mountain should have the mountain should have 430 feet of observable peak.
Okay, but you shouldn't see all the mountains. Okay.
You should see all the mountains that are. I mean, you should see what's in front of it, like what's closer to you. You shouldn't be able to see.
Why is he talking about what you can see in front of the mountain closer to you? Like, the subject is how much of the mountain can be visible. So, I mean, if you hold your hand in front of your face, obviously you're going to see your hand in front of the mountain. What does that have to do with anything? Wow. Austin WITSIT in here saying, this is where he acts like it's a big gotcha because only 90% of the mountain should be below the curve. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some kind of something going on, but to hallucinate that it's miles and miles and it has to perfectly match in every instance with zero evidence, I mean, that's definitely a scientism hallucination, Alien Big Cat. Are you still in here? I don't know. I think Alien Big Cat's just trolling in here.
You shouldn't be able to see the very base of the mountain. No, not at all. But you should be able to see the top 430 feet. So that's why I'm trying to find this specific
How
photo.
tall? And you said the mountain was 9,000 feet. So it's 400 out of 9,000 is you barely see the tip at all. Now I'm actually throwing the numbers out there off the top. I'm throwing the numbers out there at the top of my head, right? Because I'm just letting you know with the observation, all the globe Earth proponents ran the math. They let me know what the refraction is, and they're very confident that it's real. They say that the mountains are being refracted up at roughly, a little over standard refraction. And the problem with that is it's the silhouette of the mountains. It's just a shadow. It's like you walk in front of the light and block it. It isn't the light being refracted. It's a shadow. It's a silhouette. And I can predict it a year in advance. I can tell you when it's going to happen. It's going to happen in September.
So, well, it appears that Soy Lodge doesn't know what refraction is. Or backlight means. When an object is backlit. Well, I mean, he doesn't appear to know what anything is, but yeah, he's having some real trouble here. I mean, look at his face. I don't think this is acting. I do not think this is acting. I mean, it's just a lack of mental capability. I mean, it's just emptiness inside that. Like, look at his eyes. Like, there's just no processing going on here. It appears that he just doesn't understand any of this. WITSIT said, I'm supposed to be boxing this guy in a couple months. I did hear that, but, I mean, I'm not going to be holding my breath. Who thinks Soy Lodge is actually going to be brave enough to step into the boxing ring with anybody at all? I mean, has this guy done any physical exercise in his life? I mean, I don't know. Maybe he has. I'm not claiming he has or he hasn't. I'm just asking the question. Does this guy look like a guy who exercises? And how much exercise can you do with that much soy flowing through your veins? I mean, I'm sure you could do some, but I don't know. Yeah, so it appears he can't process. He doesn't know what refraction is. He doesn't know the difference between a backlit object and an object that is not backlit, that is being affected by refraction or rarefraction or any of these variables, plus all these other variables it could be that is not refraction or rarefraction. This is tough. This is really tough. But yeah, it's almost like he's like a 4-year-old toddler who's just getting decimated and he doesn't want to admit that he's getting decimated. So he has to pretend he understands what all of these things are without understanding them. But this is tough. This is tough.
Right? The way I know is because that's when the sun sets behind those mountains and light attenuates so you can't see the mountains, right? But then when the sun gets below it, that's way brighter light. Now you can see it through the mountain, through the air, and you can see the mountains predictably, and coincidentally refraction is just always going to match our predictions.
The question I have there is, how are we predicting that it's going to happen on the specific day?
Because of the cycle of the sun. So we know that, like the sun will set in a little bit of different portion of the sky each day, right? Throughout year, it kind of progresses, right? You have the analemma or whatever. And so on certain days, the sun sets where it goes right behind those mountains.
Right.
From a viewing angle of another mountain across.
While we got you here, WITSIT, what I asked a question earlier when you weren't here. What is the dumbest line of argumentation you've heard in any debate ever? Like, who was it that gave you the dumbest stream of arguments? Because at the beginning of this, Soy Lodge did 8 logical fallacies stacked. I actually forgot. I was so astounded by the amount of fallacies. I forgot what point that was. Does anybody remember? Was that Was that on I think it was on Eratosthenes when he I think it was regarding Eratosthenes. He went off and stacked 8 logical fallacies. But I would be curious to know what hurt Austin's brain the most and caused him the most pain, the dumbest stream in an argument on any topic. Hopefully he'll answer, because I'm curious about that.
The water.
Got it.
And people travel all around the world to see it, right? It's very beautiful.
Yeah.
But my point is, like, if it's refraction, that's very convenient, right? Like the refractive conditions of that day just so happen to consistently make the Earth look like it's flat, predictably in advance, you know?
Sure, but from what he was just saying, it's not refraction.
It would have to be.
But based off the math he just did.
Yeah, for the shorter number you gave me, the 155 mile, it should be visible even without the refraction. 430 feet of it. Refraction would add to that, of course. But the top of the mountain should absolutely be visible.
You can see way more than just the top of the mountain.
Well,
and we have the observations.
I need to know what the picture is. Like, I didn't know what to look for.
Yeah, like I said, I'll send them all to you. They're actually videos.
Yeah, if you could give the location and the date and the time of when the videos were taken, because then we can get the atmospheric conditions of it, we should be able to calculate the amount of refraction that would be existing in that, portion.
Yeah, let me see if actually my Telegram can help me out here.
That'd be great.
Okay, let's see
the actual numbers. So,
but yeah, and like I'm not trying to pull a fast one on you guys. I'm just letting
you know.
I know.
Like
no, you're good.
Globe Earth model for sure. I talk to people that are like obsessed with proving the globe. Trust me, and like I think truth doesn't fear investigation. I try to still man the globe. The still man of the globe in this, whatever the values are exactly, for sure, is that the mountains were refracted around the globe in all 3 of the scenarios. And
so one thing
you can believe that if you want to.
My issue is that the only example you've given us turned out to match what we said.
No.
You gave us 100. The only numbers you gave us match what we said they would say.
You're saying that you'd still see 400 feet of the
430
curve, and
feet.
I'm spitballing the numbers. Like, imagine adding like 15 more miles. I'm just kind of guessing the
400
number.
feet of the mountain.
But it doesn't even matter. Like 400 feet of the mountain of a 9,000 foot mountain is not a large percentage. So you're just going to see like the peak of the tallest part of those mountains. Canigou, the tallest mountain, is around 9,000 feet, right? Which means you're not going to see all the other mountains around them. You're just going to see the top 400 feet of the tallest mountain. That's not what we see in the observation. We see the sunset behind an entire range of mountains, and you see much more than just the peak of it.
Yeah, this is tough. I don't know if the information Austin is saying is just not processing, or if they're just that dishonest and bad faith. He's just desperately trying to find something to account for that, instead of addressing what he just said. Obviously, there's a lot of goalposts moving here, but Heracles in the chat saying he thought WITSIT was a midget. Wait, so the only reason Soy Lodge wants to box Austin WITSIT is because he thought Austin WITSIT was a midget? That's interesting. Very revealing of character, if true. Where's that information coming from? Little Star in the chat saying, Aiden, who's Aiden? Is that Soy Lodge? Claims he's a 3rd degree Mason. I think the cross is part of that, but I don't know. Well, yeah, that's a good point, Lord Zed. Austin could be a midget and still not get... Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know if I would bet on Soy Lodge over midgets either. I mean, I guess it depends on soy levels. It's kind of hard to imagine anybody with higher soy levels than Soy Lodge, but who knows?
And the official globe position is that the mountain's being refracted up. And sometimes it's seen, for sure, sometimes it's seen where the entire mountain should be below the horizon. And like, it's okay. Like I said, they claim it's standard refraction. It bends around the globe and just the rate matches the globe or whatever. But to me, like, let's just use some common sense. you can book a flight right now for September. And as long as it's not super cloudy, you can go look at the mountains set behind Canigou, and you can reliably see them from behind the curve. And to me, it's absurd to think that the refraction is just so happen to consistently show us what looks like the Earth is flat, and then lifts the mountains just enough and then stops.
But if the
to
Earth
be right in front of us like it's flat. I mean,
but if
that's
the Earth
insane to me.
was flat, then you would be able to see it, what you're describing, every day of the year.
The fog has to be the same. There's no such thing as a visibility index. This is like Bill Nye. Well, like a lot of these goofs saying you should be able to see Paris from New York if the Earth were flat. Like if the Earth were flat, precipitation would have to cease to exist. I mean, does he not realize how dumb he's saying? This is just insanity. I mean, this is just straight up insanity. The level of goofery here, this is flatlined goofery here. Soy Lodge here with flatline. Look at Austin's face. He's having trouble dealing with this level of goofery. I don't know if I've seen this many troublesome expressions from Austin before. He doesn't know what to do with this level of mental disability. This is crazy. This is crazy. If the Earth were flat, precipitation would not exist according to Soy Lodge. There would never be any fogs. It would never be foggy. The visibility index would be identical every single day. Wow. I don't know how much longer I could keep going here.
That isn't true, though. So think about this. Think about this. So even in the globe model, right? So if we think about it from a globe paradigm, you can't see the mountains until the sun sets behind them, right? So
wait, what?
You can't see the mountains on those. Typically on these days, you can't even see the mountains until the sun gets behind them. Because when the sun creates the silhouette, you can see the mountains. But before that, you can't even see them. The reason is because light gets absorbed into the air, to the atmosphere, right? So like it's called attenuation. So it's just kind of like how if it's foggy, you can't see as far as if it isn't, right? So the light's going to get absorbed into the medium, and it doesn't make it to where you can see the mountains. It's not resolvable information anymore. The sun is so bright, though, right? So when the sun gets behind it, it adds all this new information, like way brighter light, and it can make it through the attenuation of the atmosphere. And whether it's globe or flat, both explanations are the same there. Because, like, obviously, if we can't see on the globe until the sun gets behind it, the same thing is happening, right?
Well,
like the light's being attenuated.
Just really quickly, that confuses me because as the sun reaches lower in the horizon, it has to go through more atmosphere, which would then cause more attenuation. And so, I mean, I understand what you're saying here. To me, it sounds less like the light would get more intense because that's not what would happen. It sounds more like because of the absence of the light behind the shadow of the mountain, it's a lot more visible because you're dealing with sunlight and attenuation versus no sunlight at all. It makes it easier to see it because of that. But I don't understand how it would be the opposite scenario, considering, you know, on either model, as the sun is dipping towards the horizon, there is more atmosphere that it has to go through.
Yeah, that's a good point. You have to think about it, though, right? So the light is actually when we just look out and we see the mountains, the light is reflecting off. The sun's coming to the mountains, then reflecting to us, right? So by the time it reflects and gets like diffused reflections off the mountains, it comes to us. It's decreased in like magnitude a lot, right? Like the strength of the light has gotten a lot less by coming down. The sunlight's coming down, reflecting off the mountain, and then back to us so we can see it. In this scenario, the sun is in our direct line of sight behind the mountain. So we're seeing the actual source of light as opposed to the reflection of the light. So it's way stronger. And yes, it's in the dense part of the atmosphere, but the light always is, right? Like
now, I don't know much about his co-host here, but his co-host appears to be not as triggered, not fondling the microphone every second. And I don't know if he's good faith or not, but it seems like it's possible he might be engaging in good faith here because he's asking legitimate questions and he has the mental wherewithal to understand that certain things might not be dependent on the shape of the Earth. That's a step further than Soy Lodge was, many steps further than what Soy Lodge has been able to muster so far, which is not much.
in this scenario, we're looking at the mountains through the most dense part of the atmos anyway. So it's just that it's a line of sight with the sun as opposed to it being up here and reflecting back down. And like I said, this is the same on both models because you can't see the mountain until the sun gets below it. And the reason I brought that up, though, was to kind of address your idea of like, well, shouldn't we always see them if the Earth is flat? Most people don't really think about or know about this, right? It's called attenuation of light. It exists on both models. You definitely would not see forever if the Earth was flat. The light attenuates.
So real quick, I would like to shift gears a little bit here just in terms of atmospheric elements, because that reminds me of something that I saw a little bit earlier, which is, so I'm very amateur into meteorology, partially because I like to spend a lot of time on the water, particularly on the ocean. And it's very important to understand how meteorology works in that regard, because not only, are you surrounded by water and a lot of, things can happen very quickly, but it's also just generally preparing for it and understanding why things are happening quickly and things like that. But just a little brevity on that. One thing that occurs on the Earth that we see in hurricanes and typhoons is hurricanes. I believe it's in the northern hemisphere, especially around the Florida area, because we see them a lot in that area given the atmospheric conditions. They spin, I believe, clockwise in the northern hemisphere.
Oh, wow. He's using this old, easily debunked argument. So they spin both ways in both alleged hemispheres. Have these guys just done zero prep work here? I mean, it's tough. I mean, there are definitely, more spin. You could say the majority of them spin one way in one alleged hemisphere versus the other. But obviously, they've been observed. I forgot which analysis I went over all that on. I mean, if these guys are just keep using the old tired, it almost like you need someone like Dave Weiss with like a little 5-minute presentation, easily debunking all of these points, and then they'll just look dumb when they bring them up again, because this is all from, they have NOAA data. Like, this is all from scientism-sourced data, like so-called official sources.
Whereas typhoons in the southern hemisphere, it's another name for the same, weather event, spins counterclockwise. And the globe model attributes that to the Coriolis effect, which is due to the Earth as a globe being, spinning on its axis, and the equator being slightly larger, things like that. All those little details taken into account, because of the way that the spin affects the atmosphere, it causes a divergence in atmospheric conditions based on its direction and distance from the equator. And that causes the varying rotation that is consistent in the northern and southern hemisphere of these large weather systems. So, is there any flat Earth argument to explain that phenomenon?
Yeah. So it's important to understand the variables from the other side. So we can lay this out. I'll do it pretty quickly. So, like, for example, the spin of the Earth, right, is actually the spin of the universe, right? The sky spins instead of the Earth spinning, right? So this generates real inertial forces. So you will have like forces generated if the whole like sky spinning around you, right? So to keep that in mind. Also, you have the sun. If we're tilted, you mentioned the tilt, right? So we're on a tilted axis in the globe model. On a flat Earth model, the sun is just at an angle, right? So the sun itself is at an angle and the Earth is horizontal. And then the globe says, well, it looks like the sun's at an angle because we're tilted. So you keep that in mind. It seems like as the sun moves in and out and in its angular relationship to the Earth, that it's like the flow, the energy flow from the sun can directly affect the Earth at the angle at which it has an ecliptic path over top of us. And when it comes to the overall rotation of the universe, I don't want to get too technical, right? But that generates like inertial forces. So you would have centrifugal forces, right, with the angular momentum of the universe spinning around. And then you would have Coriolis forces. So not to be confused with the globe version of Coriolis, which is an apparent deflection because the Earth is supposedly spinning, but an actual Coriolis force, which would be twice the magnitude, which would create an inward force. And then you have, people call them Euler forces with satellites and stuff. We won't get into that. But long story short, there are real forces generated on a stationary Earth as the sky spins around it. The stars in the sky and the sky spins around it, creating real forces. The sun's at an angle and it has real forces as well that are going to interact with us in relation to that. That's going to give you all of the weather patterns that we have. And then the globe interprets it through the lens of, oh, well, the reason there's a tilt is because we're tilted, right? The reason that there's a spin is because we're spinning. And so they just attribute the effects to something different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I do have one other question and thought.
Okay.
It's similar to this. So I want to get a preface of your understanding before I ask the question. So in terms of the atmosphere, since we're on that topic, how does that separate in your version of the flat Earth model from ground to atmosphere to space of the universe? Because I want to clarify that before I ask my question.
Yeah, good question. Like basically, how do you have a gradient?
Yes.
Yeah, so obviously we would say that the antecedent to gas pressure is a physical container. The globe kind of claims, well, no, that's not true. Ours is gravity or whatever. And it would kind of be the one exception. We can't replicate it, whatever. Special pleading is what I would say. But long story short, so I would say gradient is change in pressure, right? And so that's delta X. And so you need X to have the delta X. So you need the gas pressure to have a change in the first place. I would say that's our argument. Most people kind of divert to gradient. Not saying you're doing that. Obviously, you're just asking a question. So anyway, I would say that we have, for one, it's relative density layers, right? Obviously on its base. So like they sort out based on density. And so then the question would be like, well, what is density? What gives something density? What gives something weight? And these are good questions. I could answer them all. Density is compactness of matter. So there's an electrostatic bond that holds them together. Weight is mass times gravity. So that's volume and density times the fact that things fall down at an average, all electric. So I don't want to get too in the weeds. Quickly
I would like to. There was one thing you said that stuck out to me, which was the density issue. So, if density is ultimately what causes things to fall, then theoretically, things that are different densities should always fall at different rates, right?
No. So to clarify, I'm not even saying that things only fall because of density. It's just that you have to define each term. I would say that there has to be something that sets the up and down.
So they just jumped off that topic so quick. So, in terms of the jet streams and air pressure, obviously that all has to do with formation of storms. Now, it's kind of weird. I mean, do they not know that? So they're just pretending it's only Coriolis. It can't be anything else. I mean, it's so weird how they don't address all these other variables. So I'm just going to put these two images on the screen real quick. So, again, regardless of flat or globe, you have these currents of air of varying air pressure. And if there is some kind of electromagnetic force, YouTube's getting a little laggy here. If there is some kind of electromagnetic force, and it follows the path of the sun doesn't dart back and forth. So, on a flat plane, obviously, give me 1 second. I'm trying to get this other image here. So, depending on the path of the sun, let's say it's a flat plane or whatever, and the path of the sun is going around the center of the plane, you still have all of these different, you have the westerlies, the southeasterly trades, the northeasterly trades, the westerlies, all over. So to hallucinate that none of this and air pressure has any effect on the formation and direction of hurricanes, typhoons, tornadoes. By the way, tornadoes have also been found to spin both directions. It's like just this level of hallucination to pretend, or to just pretend all these variables don't exist. These variables all exist in scientism. Why wouldn't they have these effects? That's why it's important to keep the scientific method in mind. If you don't have the dependent variables, independent variables, and the controls clearly delineated, you don't really know what causes what or how or why. These are just assumptions, the bedrock of scientism. But clearly they have some kind of an effect. They're going different directions. And if this is also electromagnetically linked to the sun's rotational path over the plane of the Earth, if the Earth is flat, again, I'm not alleging it is. But if it is, why would, like, these variables could all line up exactly this way also. I mean, obviously, burden of proof is on positive claim. You have to prove that they do. But to hallucinate that they can't, I mean, that's a pretty illogical position.
And I would say that that's electric in nature. We have a downward electric current on the Earth. It's 10 microamps per cubic meter, so it's very small, but it's measurable. You can actually run a generator off of it. It's pretty fast, and just off the sky. Long story short, it's nearly constant, right? And that sounds familiar, right? Because the rate at which things fall is nearly constant. It isn't exactly 9.8 constantly, right?
Okay, Austin in the chat says the dumbest argument ever was probably so-called Professor Dave, no surprise there, denying that a spinning object would appear to go opposite directions when viewed from opposite directions. Because he then held a globe up to the webcam and spun it, providing a live demonstration as he simultaneously mocked it. So he wasn't, okay, so he wasn't aware that the webcam was stationary? The perspective example I always use, I mean, if you just point at an object, if you're in an office chair with wheels, you could just go spin to your right while pointing at an object between your feet while spinning in the chair. Then look up and look at the ceiling. I mean, that's just the orientation of observer relative to floor, ceiling, objects on the floor, objects on the ceiling. Continue spinning to the right the same way and see if it looks like the rotation's the same way. I mean, it's like this is children's level stuff, but I'm not surprised that Professor Dave can't grasp that.
Fluctuates slightly based on where you are and if there's, electrical field conditions, blah, blah, blah. So I would say there's an electric bias. We have tons of electromagnetic energy coming from the sky, measurably. It sets a downward bias, there's a downward electric current, and then everything kind of sorts itself out with density relative to those mediums, meaning it's going to choose if it goes up or down relative to its medium after the electric current has set the up or down. And once it goes down, it's just going to go at general rates, right? It can only go so fast, basically. Once it goes down, it goes down. If it goes up, it goes up. So yeah, that would be the answer. You're asking obviously a very deep question, which is basically a replacement for gravity.
Well, no, I'm trying to get to
I have
something.
Some thoughts
what if there's no medium? What if it's a vacuum?
So, okay, good question. So, well, for one, obviously, if you pull the air out of a vacuum chamber, like you just made it less dense, right? Like, so
removed all matter.
Well, obviously, there's no such thing as an actual perfect vacuum, but even if you were able to remove all matter, my point is, say you drop a brick, it's more dense than the air, right? If you put that brick in a vacuum, it's still more dense than the vacuum. You actually just made the medium less dense, right? So it's still more dense is what I'm saying.
Well,
but
yeah,
Austin says the audience would see the globe spinning clockwise while he would see it counterclockwise. Well, yeah. The reason I bring up the chair is because a lot of people without the mental capacity to think about other people are seeing. I bring up the chair example because then all the narcissists, they don't have to worry about what someone else is seeing. All the narcissists, because they're in their own head, so they could worry about what they're seeing when they look down at the object while spinning in the chair, and then what they see looking at the ceiling. Because narcissists, I mean, they have trouble thinking about what other people would see because they're narcissists. That's one of the reasons I use that example. But yeah, I mean, obviously, things would, there's a million different ways you could do that too, where things appear to spin different directions from where you are. But for a narcissist in the same moment, like without even having to switch positions or record and watch back recordings, I like the office chair example because it makes it easy, because even narcissists can experience that for themselves.
But what I'm asking is, if you have a brick and a feather in a vacuum, should they not fall at the same rate? If density is all it is, or should they fall at different rates? If different is what I meant to say. If you have a brick and a feather in a vacuum and you drop them, they should fall at different rates, right? If density is the issue. And again, we're saying a near perfect vacuum.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's all that exists, right? But no, I would say I don't think so, no, because once it goes down, it goes down. And so it starts to increase its speed as it can, its acceleration down. Obviously, they only would drop at the same rate in a vacuum, right? Because you have air resistance. If you don't have that air resistance, the feather's more dense in the air, the brick's more dense in the air. So that's just going to decide that it goes down and or up, right? And then it's going to fall in relation to that medium. And also, in a vacuum, you still have electric fields. So there's something called the free impedance of free space. So you have electric permittivity, magnetic permeability. Even inside vacuums, there's this electric interaction going on. The feather is electrostatic, right? The brick is electrostatic. Even in the vacuum, it's electrostatic. You can get all into the weeds with that. With like we have already proven that there's electromagnetic fluctuations in a vacuum. There's basically a background that energy comes from. Quantum physics calls it many other names. But all that to say, so all these play a role.
But then my question would be,
Oh, wow. I've been talking this whole time with a muted mic. Interesting. So, Val said, MindShock, please do some reviews of the germ theory and virus discussions. I did an extensive podcast on that. Louis Pasteur versus Antoine Béchamp, germ theory versus terrain theory. YouTube took it down. Perhaps I will re-upload it on Rockfin or Rumble. And WITSIT said, did this guy just deny that bricks were electrostatic? Well, this guy obviously doesn't even know what electric means. He doesn't appear to know what forces are. He obviously doesn't understand the scientific method. So it would just take these many 10-hour, special ed classes to get him up to speed on all of the individual building blocks required to have this kind of conversation. So I don't know what can be done here with Soy Lodge.
if your argument is that it's not gravity, that it is density, then even with the electromagnetism aspect, you could take a 10-pound bowling ball and an 8-pound bowling ball. Electromagnetism is going to work on them fairly similarly. They should fall at the same rate, right? Or at different rates.
No, I mean, to maybe I could just ask you the same question, right? So like if you think that gravity is causing it, if there's a more dense object and a less dense object falling, how does gravity make them fall at the same rate if they're just different densities?
Because
is gravity pull one stronger than the other?
Because density isn't the issue. Gravity.
Yeah, no. If it's two separate masses that are of different densities and different weights, they'll still fall at the same rate based on the principles of gravity, just purely because the only reason that we see things fall at different rates on Earth is because
it's kind of hilarious. Soy Lodge needed to have his partner bail him out here, because Soy Lodge, and look at, he's got his arms crossed. He's so defensive, like this little toddler that got scolded and called out for pretending to know things he doesn't know. Whereas his co-host here, at least he's not on the level of like a mentally disabled toddler. Here, he appears to have some kind of mental capacity. I don't know if he's arguing in good faith or not, but at least it's a possibility, maybe, that he is arguing in good faith, so that's interesting. But it's kind of hilarious he had to bail out Soy Lodge, because Soy Lodge was getting decimated so much, and it's so painful. The co-host had to bail him out here. Let's see where this discussion goes, because if it's going deep in gravity, we went over this so many times. I'm not really going to do another deep dive into gravity. You can check out the other flat earth analyses and, of course, the complete dismantling and debunking of Einstein's relativity by Run Z Cow here on the MINDSHOCK channel.
And I'm just going to go off the globe model.
We're using the globe model, yeah.
The reason that you see things, fall at different rates on Earth is because of the atmospheric conditions. So if you have a feather and a brick and you drop them in a non-vacuum environment in our atmosphere, the feather, because it has a lower density, will reach terminal velocity faster than the brick.
No. By the way, I see what you're saying. Yes. All right. Yeah,
so therefore, a feather will reach its terminal velocity, which is a lot slower than the brick, so it'll fall a lot slower than the brick. But in a vacuum, as some experiments and I think some of the vacuum chambers,
there have been experiments where they've dropped bowling balls and feathers in a vacuum chamber and they fall at exactly the same rate.
Yes, and
that's what people think.
That's what's on video.
No, actually, a university has proven that dropping different chemicals fall at different rates. Literally different chemicals, and a gravimeter has proven objects fall at different rates. Gravimeters are way more precise than that video that supposedly proved
in a vacuum.
So. Yes. Gravimeters use a vacuum-sealed chamber. They drop a little BB and they use interferometry, so cross.
I mean, look at Soy Lodge's posture. I mean, at least his subconscious knows he's being absolutely obliterated here. I mean, point by point by point. He doesn't even have the scientism position correct. I mean, that's what makes it even funnier. That's the same thing with all of these debates. These people arguing on the side of the heliocentric globe, they don't even have their own religion accurate. Austin has to educate them on their own position. Because, I mean, they don't even have a hope of a prayer understanding the flat earth position, but they don't even understand their own position. So most of these so-called debates with Austin is him just educating them on their own model. And it's tough. It's tough. Because they're obviously extremely ignorant about all of these things. And they also, again, they just keep spamming this false cause logical fallacy, this false dichotomy logic fallacy, circular reasoning logical fallacy. It's just the mental capacity just doesn't appear to be there to understand that there could be different variables at play.
Cross patterns of lasers and interference patterns to actually measure things falling. And so they fall at different rates.
Outside of the margin of one being released a millisecond before the other? Or are these rates that are we talking about like they hit a certain laser at a different time? Or are we talking about they pass through a set of lasers at different rates?
I'm specifically just pointing out that the rate isn't constant, it changes. So like you can drop the same objects at the same place and over time, at different times, it'll be different rates. Inside a vacuum chamber, right? Inside a warehouse. And it's actually because everything's electric. If there's slight fluctuation in the electric field, it'll cause it. Actually, university proved that by monitoring thunderstorms in relation to the vacuum chamber. But anyway,
I went over this a lot deeper in Austin Whitsitt versus Bryant Myers in the Bryant Myers episode. It was actually Professor Dave. It was a couple of flat earthers against against Bryant Myers. And Myers just kept spamming that gravity's a constant. Now, this has been, I mean, it's been known for quite some time that it's not a constant, that big G is not a constant. I believe. I mean, this was all theorized earlier, but this source I have on the screen right now is kind of mainstream. Journal of Modern Physics, Volume 7, Number 6, March 2016. Newton's gravitational constant, big G, is not a constant. And then, of course, this has all been reaffirmed many, many times, all in the mainstream. Basically, scientism cultists just call them anomalies anytime something doesn't match. I had another good example here. Trying to. Various sources here about gravity not being the same everywhere anyway, for various attributed reasons. So there are extreme differences in gravitational acceleration. And they just call them, oh, here it is. Gravity map reveals Earth's extremes. I'll put it up on the screen in a second. These are excerpts from this. This is from... this article here on New Scientist. And there are unexpected locations, local anomalies are given. So anyway, so clearly it's not a constant, and this New Scientist article is August 2013 by Jacob Aaron. And this is all using data from NASA, European Space Agency, all the favorites of the scientism cult. So even the scientism cult itself, clearly Soy Lodge, is not up to date here. And his co-host, they're not up to date in understanding that the acceleration is not constant.
Well, I
guess what I'm trying to point out to you guys, I just brought up the gravity thing because I wanted to point out to you guys, right? Most people think gravity's a force that's pulling everything down. That isn't really what the globe model claims anymore. That doesn't work. So gravity isn't a force that pulls anything anymore in the globe model. It's the bending and warping of space-time. It creates a gravity well and it guides things down to the ground. So what I'm trying to explain is there isn't a huge difference in the sense that, well, what is mass? Mass is volume times density. That's what mass is. And then it's times the average rate at which things fall. And things fall at roughly the same rate because once it's determined it's going to go down, it's just more dense. There's a buoyant force, which is much stronger, and it goes down to the ground to find equilibrium. And it isn't constant. It changes. That actually supports my point much stronger. Why would the rate at which things fall change if gravity's constant?
Air resistance.
Inside a vacuum chamber.
That's what I'm saying, is it wouldn't. If you drop a feather and a bowling ball in a vacuum chamber, they fall at exactly the same rate, and it's on video. It's been proven numerous times. That's why
I'm saying is it's been proven at the highest levels, like universities, that the same object dropped at the same place in a vacuum chamber will change how fast it falls.
Okay, well, I mean, we're talking about comparative. We're not talking about the same object. We're talking about dropping two different objects of very different densities. You might expect that, if there's force applied to something, or if even something gets stuck, if there's a little bit of friction at the top, yeah, you're going to get tiny, tiny, tiny little variations every time you repeat something. The more sensitive your instruments get, the more you're going to pick up on it. I think, if I remember correctly, PCR tests early in COVID were dialed to be too sensitive, so they were detecting fragments of COVID DNA, or mRNA, I guess, in people who did not have COVID.
Whoa. Look at Austin's face. This goof's bringing up COVID. Oh, man, the logical fallacy stacks here. Oh, man, this is so tough. I probably got about 5 minutes left in me on this. Again, I mean, the only thing I'm going to mention regarding the PCR, I'll put it on here just for... I'm actually not going to explain it. I am only going to put this on here. I am only going to put this one image on here. Obviously, Soy Lodge is not going to be able to put 2 and 2 together in regarding what this would mean for all PCR tests. That's all I'm going to put up. That's it. But clearly, Soy Lodge is a goof. Mr. 8 Rice 7 IMO 7HY 8U cash sign CH says name calling denotes weakness in an argument, in my opinion. Does it really, though? 1 + 1 = 2, you moron. Is that argument weak or incorrect? If I'm pointing out why it's clueless, like, yeah, here, I mean, the image is the argument. So I can call him... Now, if I called him a goof without the image, I mean, I want people to think for themselves. Usually I'll go through it. I mean, I just went over all this stuff with all of Soy Lodge's goalpost moving and all of his other logical fallacy stacks. An ad hom fallacy is when you're using an attack or so-called name-calling in the absence of an argument. If you're using it in addition to your argument, it is not fallacious.
They didn't even have the entirety of the strand. So that's why that's what I'm saying here, is if you make your instruments too sensitive, you're going to catch things that aren't really there. So that's why I keep going back to the bowling ball and the feather in a vacuum, is because if you drop a bowling ball, which is, say, 10 pounds of mass, and you drop a feather, which we'll say is an ounce of mass, and there's no air resistance, then if the density is what's causing a difference in the rate of fall, along with the electromagnetic field, they should fall at different rates. But if the issue is gravity and a total lack of air resistance, they should fall at the same rate.
And I do have a comment on what you were talking about the comparative thing of the same object at different times. Going back to my history of, being on the water and things like that, that kind of is relevant to, based on the globe model, the effect that the moon has on gravitational pull of the Earth in tides. So the whole reason that in the globe model that we have different tides at different times of the day, and the reason that the tides change by an hour every day, is because they are directly correlated between the moon and the sun, in the way that in the globe model, we revolve around the sun and the moon revolves around us. And that's the reason why not only do the tides change per time of day on, a roughly hour, daily cycle basis, and you can reliably get a high tide and a low tide every 6 hours from each other. Roughly, it's a little bit more because of that extra hour, because of the revolution of the moon. That's also why we have spring tides, and I can't remember the name of the other tide, but why the height of the tides change on that cyclical pattern, because when the sun and the moon are aligned within our rotational period.
Okay, I have to check out here, because, even though this guy isn't Soy Lodge, again, just the level of goofery in not being able to mentally process that if the sun and the moon are involved in electromagnetic processes, then the water would indeed be affected. That's presupposing the moon even affects the tides, which, there's research on both sides of that, even from the scientism position. So, yeah, this all goes back to false cause, false dichotomy, as if there can't be other variables involved, as if that's the true cause, as if that has that can't happen on either model. Because even if, let's say, the moon does affect the tides, it could be in a manner completely unlike what the scientism cultists claim, even if the Earth is a globe. Similarly, flat earther explanations for this could be completely wrong. The Earth could still be flat, and it's by a completely different methodology. But again, these are absolute basics that Soy Lodge and his cohort are missing here. Just the absolute basics of logic. Nothing to do with the shape of the Earth. Bogan asks, will you follow up with part 3 soon, Bruce? Yeah, that's why I'm ending it kind of quick here, because then my recovery time won't have to be as much. I'll try to get to it within inside of the next week. And also start Austin WITSIT versus Professor Dave, so-called Professor Dave. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get to that in a single go, but who knows? If Professor Dave is a little bit more entertaining in his goofery, maybe I will. But Soy Lodge really is Boar Lodge as well. And Alien Big Cat 23, I am going to fire one warning here. If you're just going to be trolling and spamming without actually addressing any of the points being made, I might have to start giving you timeouts, like that Tsutsaka goof. Like, you gotta at least address what's being said instead of cowardly dodge everything. If you're trolling, whatever. If everybody's just having fun laughing at your goofery, then maybe we won't need to put you in timeout. I'll kind of leave it up to everybody else in the chat again. Oh, you think I won't? Okay. Challenge accepted. We got a timeout for Alien Big Cat 23. Sometimes the toddlers need their timeout. I gave the warning. I warned the poor little guy. Now he's been around here for a long time. I really think he's trolling. There's no way he doesn't know the difference between science and scientism. There've actually been quite a few timeouts. Tsutsaka got like 4 timeouts in a single stream. I forget which one that was. Tsutsaka, I think, has the record for most timeouts. I think Fight the Flat Earth, I had to give him a timeout when he was in one of these chats a while ago. There have been a number of timeouts given. Salt says now he's going to say he was banned for nothing in his Discord. Alien Big Cat has his own Discord? I didn't know that. That's funny. Really? Now, he's been around for quite a while here. He's never trolled to this level. Usually, they're just random comments. But he's only been actively trolling, like, the past few streams. But he was getting a little too brazen. A little too audacious. Sometimes you gotta smack him down when that happens. Yeah, Lord Zed, you've been going back and forth with him for a while, though. But let's say a few months ago, he was nowhere near as trollish, right? It was just some random comments here and there. In the past few streams, he's just gotten real weird. Is it like a Tsutsaka altar or something? I don't know if he was acting... He was relatively well-behaved for his entire tenure here in the MINDSHOCK chat. Oh yeah, Lord Zed noticed the switch up. I liked Alien Brews, so weird the switch up. Yeah. He definitely got weird the past few chats. Setter says, last modern day debate with Fight the Flat Earth MINDSHOCK was mentioned. Did you see that one? No, I didn't see it. It's only so much of Craig one can handle. I watched some of his, what was it, MINDSHOCK Mondays or something. They were kind of funny. They were pretty funny. I was thinking about possibly doing some analyses on them. But we'll see. I mean, there's only so much goofery one can handle. There's only so much goofery one can handle at any particular time. So, that'll be it for now. We will continue. Pretty soon. Hopefully I'll be able to finish this one pretty soon, and we will get to many others. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. I have another stream coming up later today. Very, very critical. One of the most important ones ever. So whoever shows up for that one later today, that will be of the utmost importance in the realm of logic and reason. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.